All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are back. It is Monday, March 23rd. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this morning. Bit of a late start today, by about 15 minutes or so. Got back late last night from Arizona. A couple of great days over there in the desert over the weekend. Got some spring training action in Goodyear, seeing the Cincinnati Reds. How about the game a couple of nights ago? I'm sure you guys obviously weren't watching. Maybe you heard Tommy Thrall and company on the radio. But the Reds hit a walk-off grand slam. P.J. Higgins, 3-2 count late in that ball game against the Chicago White Sox. Obviously, it's spring training baseball, but it was pretty electric stuff in Goodyear, Arizona over the weekend. So a couple of great days over there. Looking forward to being back, obviously, here on the show and pumping out some more daily content, certainly here as opening day rapidly approaching here in the Queen City. Lots of Reds conversation to talk about. Touch on the Bengals a little bit to start. Wide receiver market in the National Football League was reset this morning. Jamar Chase, no longer the highest paid wide receiver in the National Football League. That title now belongs to Jackson Smith-Njigba. We will talk about that a little bit on today's show. But the conversation topic in town right now happens to be about a particular left-handed pitcher who's got a particular blister problem, as Nick Lodolo once again has a blister issue, making his last start of the spring yesterday. Had to exit the ball game early. Terry Francona said after the game they popped it in the training room, trying to drain it certainly a little bit, and we'll see ultimately if he's going to be available to go in the Boston series or not. Brady Singer, a couple of days prior to that, he had the blister injury. We all know, obviously, the situation with Hunter Green right now, not going to be available for the first half of the season. All of a sudden, that depth that we had at that starting pitcher spot that we had talked about, that we had been so excited about, well, it's getting tested here pretty early. And again, blister issues, I don't think Singer has had necessarily an extended history with having this type of problem. Nick Lodolo obviously has, so it's something that they'll monitor. Hopefully it doesn't, neither one of those guys miss any time, or if it is time, certainly not significant time as they get those issues dealt with. But I think we're all excited about the Reds starting rotation. Next thing you know, you lose an ace, then you got a couple of guys, really your 2 and your 3. After that, they're going to have some blister issues that we'll see ultimately if it's going to cost them any time or what that situation looks like. We'll talk a little Cincinnati Reds on the show. Also in town, Wes Miller. He's going to land on his feet here. He has been hired at Charlotte as the next head coach. He gets to go back to certainly an area he's familiar with. Obviously spent a lot of time in North Carolina, played there, was the head coach at UNC Greensboro for 10 years before ultimately taking the Cincinnati job 5 years ago. Happy for Wes, right? You know, it was time to move on here in Cincinnati, but by no means was this a situation where you would wish failure upon Wes Miller. By all accounts, he's a good guy. Had an opportunity. Certainly had some injury issues throughout his career here, which I'm sure frustrates him, but it was just time to move on. He lands on his feet. You know, in college basketball, there's only so many of these jobs, and, ultimately if you get fired, you might be, on the bench, right, looking for a job and waiting, right? Might have to take a job as an assistant to still have, a pretty significant job, obviously, at Charlotte, not a Power 5 job, but still a pretty significant job nonetheless. Happy for Wes that ultimately gets to land on his feet. And apparently, the rumors are circulating, Jeff Goodman and others, college basketball people, talking about Jared Calhoun could be official in Cincinnati as early as today. It could happen as we're sitting here live on this show over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour, certainly as well. Utah State picks up a big win, the first round NCAA tournament. They play Arizona, hung in there, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, a little bit outmatched in that particular ball game, but kind of feels like the writing is on the wall for Jared Calhoun to be the next head coach here in Cincinnati. Some flag football thoughts. I think Joe Burrow scared a lot of us over the weekend, and I think the flag football people, Team USA, proved a lot of people wrong. I kind of had a feeling it was going to go a little bit like this. Certainly not maybe as one-sided as it was, but I mean, it's two different sports that they're playing, and to think that these NFL guys would just come in and dominate these guys, like, this is what they do. They're elite flag football players, and that certainly was on display. Credit to those guys. I think they earned a lot of respect from people around the country, people that were tapping in, certainly, to that event. But I had a feeling that it was kind of going to go that way, certainly a little bit. I mean, this, again, totally different game. So we'll talk about flag football. Tom Brady was back there slinging it around, and Joe Burrow, as I mentioned, gave a lot of us cause for concern with some of his actions in that ball game. Certainly, he was going at it, right? This was not, Pro Bowl type stuff, and even Joe Burrow in the Pro Bowl was kind of, being competitive out there and showing some juice, but certainly showed that over the weekend in that flag football event. Also, March Madness, right? This is our first live show since really that fully has kicked off. We had a plan in place, and I mentioned this on, the podcast and on the show, but that was kind of an emergency episode to come in that morning and react to the Miami first 4 win. We had to absolutely do some content on the Red Hawks. What a season they had. Run ended against Tennessee, and obviously a little bit outmatched in that game, but I thought Tennessee did a tremendous job of saying, you know what, we're going to push the 3-point line back on you, right? We're going to make you have to beat us down low, and obviously the Red Hawks didn't have the ability to do it, but what a run. Travis Steele, what a season for the Red Hawks as they're, kind of back on the map here as a university and certainly as a basketball program as well. So what a run from those guys. But I'm sitting here looking at some of these games here, and, we'll kind of get into on the show about how everyone's saying NIL, it's ruining madness, whatever, there's less upsets. Well, it's setting up a pretty good table as far as what the Sweet 16 is going to look like. I mean, just looking at some of these games here, Arkansas, Arizona, Illinois, Houston, Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, Purdue. The Big Ten is off to an incredible start in this tournament. St. John's, Duke. Incredible game. Kind of feels like upset situation there for the Blue Devils. Alabama, Michigan. How good the Tide looked last night. Just pouring in threes from the outside. Heck of a job by Nate Oates. It's his 5th time going to the Sweet 16, and that guy just wins in March. I think it's safe to say that at this point. Another guy that just wins in March is Tom Izzo. Michigan State, UConn on Friday, 9:45, prime time, Eastern time. Pretty unbelievable. And Tennessee, Iowa State, going to be a great game there as well. So we'll talk about some of the games and look ahead a little bit to what we got here on Thursday and Friday. Obviously, you're in a situation now where you're looking around and you're like, oh, my goodness. You're just sitting in front of a TV watching basketball the past few days, and now you're without it for a couple of days, which is obviously kind of a weird feeling. But we'll talk about March Madness. I've been, is it the best tournament of all time? This year, wouldn't say that, but there were some games, particularly yesterday, that were really good. A couple of upsets, right? I mean, North Carolina lost to VCU. A&M took St. Mary's out. Pretty one-sided there. Obviously, Wisconsin lost to High Point. That was a good High Point team. They've been good all year. Gave Calipari and that Arkansas team some fits as well. So the tournament's been great. I got no issues with, the lack of upsets, right? I think we want to see the best teams go out there and match up against each other and may the best team win. And ultimately, we're going to get that over the course of the next couple of weeks. So appreciate everyone for being here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. On our way to 23,000 subscribers here at the channel as we're really picking up steam with Reds opening day just around the corner. So help us out, subscribe. If you see any of our stuff, whether it be a social media post or certainly a clip on YouTube, help us out. Hit that thumbs up icon on whatever that post or video is. That really does go a long way as it allows some more people to get some more eyeballs on what we're doing here at Chatterbox Sports. But appreciate everyone for being here. Let's dive in a little bit to the Cincinnati Bengals. There's a couple of topics that I want to hit on with Cincinnati. Jamar, is he going to potentially want more money at some point? I'm sure he will. But Jackson Smith and Jigba signed this morning, 4-year deal. Upwards of $42 million per year. I believe Jamar's in that $40 million range. So JSN got paid, and rightfully so. Good call there by John Schneider and company. And my goodness, highest paid wide receiver in the history of the National Football League. What effect is that going to have potentially on Jamar Chase? Also, some depth chart thoughts. We did this at the end of last week, either on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll talk about it a little bit, specifically on the offensive side. I think we've all been, hammering into the ground. Oh, my goodness, linebacker, what are they doing? Yes, we get that. We understand that. But there's also some needs on this team and certainly some depth needs even on offense, right? Cody Ford, seems like a foregone conclusion that he's going to be cut from this ball club, right? What are we doing there at that swing tackle spot if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? How are you adding some depth perhaps into that running back room? Are you bringing in some competition for Yoshi at that wide receiver 3 spot? Talk about that a little bit. And also Tyson Anderson. I don't know what the Bengals are doing, to be honest with you. Again, this whole free agency offseason process has been a bit of a roller coaster for Cincinnati, right? There's been some high moments. There's been some low moments. Letting Tyson Anderson walk on a 1-year deal that's less than $2 million to go to not a rival, but a team in the AFC that's a contender in Denver. I have no clue what you're doing if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. I have absolutely no clue what you're doing if you are the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll talk about all of those topics here in a second, but do want to give a shout-out to our friends over at QC Kinetix, our new friends here at Chatterbox Sports. If knee pain or shoulder pain is slowing down your performance, whether it be on the golf course, the pickleball court, or even in the gym, talk to the care team at QC Kinetix Cincinnati about regenerative medicine options. Learn more at qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. The team over there is absolutely incredible. They have a location in Liberty Township right across from Lakota East High School. The folks at QC Kinetix bring a different approach with regenerative medicine, and you don't have to be an athlete. Just a weekend warrior here in Cincinnati dealing with back pain or trying to get ready for golf season, they can help. Check out the team at QC Kinetix and see what they're all about. Again, visit qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. Also want to show some love to our friends over at 78 Cigars. Cincinnati legend Anthony Munoz, he's got a new venture, and we're fired up to partner with it here at the Stone Shield Show. Introducing 78 Cigars, a premium cigar line from the Hall of Famer himself. If you love great cigars and Cincinnati football history, this is the perfect combination. You can grab 78 Cigars right now at both Montgomery Inn locations. That's in Montgomery, of course, and at the Boathouse downtown, or over at Creekside Cigar Co. And check them out online. Just head to anthonymunoz.com and click on the 78 Cigars page to learn more and order today. That's 78 Cigars from the greatest offensive lineman to ever do it, Anthony Munoz. Is this really going to affect Jamar in the short term? I don't think so, but it just goes to show you the going rate for really, really good wide receivers. And we talk about this all the time in the National Football League. Regardless of position, you're not always in a spot where you're the best player at a specific position and you're also the highest paid guy. I think that was true for Jamar Chase, obviously, during his time at the top. And JSN has had a great career to this point and certainly is a huge reason as to why Seattle was able to win the world title this past year. He's not better than Jamar Chase, right? Let's be honest. He ain't a better wide receiver than Jamar Chase, and he's getting more money than him, right? And I know Jamar wants to win, and he's seemingly, I would say, a selfless player, certainly a relatively selfless player, but he also wants his money, right? And he also knows his worth, and he also knows that, hey, when he's out there, he's the best wide receiver in the National Football League, and he's always out there because he's always available, as he hasn't really had any injury history to this point of his NFL career. So if Jamar is going to continue to play at a high level, the Bengals are certainly going to have to allocate more and more resources to Jamar. So it just kind of goes to show you, I think it's a good lesson, right? Because Jamar is obviously a receiver. He's not going to play this game forever, and he's not going to play this game as long as Joe Burrow plays this game. But if he continues to execute over the course of these next few years, and I understand that he just inked a big-time deal last year, if he continues to ball out like this, he's going to want more money. He's going to get more expensive. It's going to become more difficult to put elite players around him and around Joe Burrow and around T. Higgins, and you can find yourself in a situation where you run into some trouble. That's why we've been banging the table saying you've got money to spend as it relates to where you're at in the salary cap here in the National Football League. Last we checked, the Bengals had upwards of $15 million that they haven't spent yet to this point. And we're sitting there going, the prime of these guys' careers is only so long. And again, Joe and Jamar are going to continue to get more expensive. And they're so expensive right now. But it's just going to continue to go up. So this feels like an opportunity, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, to put all your chips in the middle of the table and sit yourself down as a team and say, you know what, this is our time to go right here, right now. And I think that's a good lesson when you look at this JSN deal that broke this morning. Eventually, you know, if Jamar continues to ball out, stay healthy, you're going to have to pay him another contract, right? That's going to pay him more than the one you're paying him right now. And the one you're paying him right now just shattered records as it relates to how expensive a contract is for a wide receiver in the National Football League. So, you know, I think it just goes to show what, you know, the lessons that you can learn in this league from where contracts are at right now financially. These star players are getting paid, right? And they're going to continue to get paid. And the price is going to continue to go up, and it's going to be more and more difficult to surround them with quality players. And when you don't spend all the money that you have as it relates to the salary cap, you've put yourself in a very difficult situation. It's self-deprecating, to be honest with you, right? You're not in a situation where it's baseball and you can use the excuse of, well, our ownership group doesn't have as much money as all these other ownership groups. Obviously, the Bengals, Blackburn Brown family, they're not rich compared to these other owners in the National Football League, but there's a salary cap. Spend to the cap, right? You want to short it by $15, $20 million? Why? Why? Go out and get that combo linebacker that you had the ability to get in free agency, and you didn't, right? Because eventually Jamar and Joe and T, they are so expensive right now, but if they're going to stick around here long term, guess what? They're going to get more and more expensive as the years ultimately go on. Some depth chart thoughts. Paul Dehner Jr. kind of broke it down this morning at The Athletic. I think we're excited about the additions that they made in free agency, right? Bringing in the likes of Boye Mafe, right? Bringing in the likes of Brian Cook, and obviously Jonathan Allen going to be really manning that interior now with B.J. Hill and probably T.J. Slayton, two guys that I think were cut candidates for Cincinnati, or at least for me, the beginning of the offseason. And now I've kind of taken a step back and said, you know what? You probably keep these guys around. Their role looks a little bit different. Adding Jonathan Allen ultimately into the mix. But let's talk about offense here for a second, right? What do you do with that wide receiver 3 spot if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? You got Yoshi, final year of his contract. Is he going to be a long-term piece for Cincinnati, right? I think he's going to garner some cash, right? Certainly more cash than you would expect from a guy that's a 6th-round pick. And if you're the Bengals, I think the grand debate here, and you can make this debate at the running back spot, but also at the wide receiver 3 spots, can you just kind of plug and play at that area, considering the guys that you have around that position? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and, of course, T. Higgins. Can you plug and play at wide receiver 3? Can you plug and play potentially at at running back? I don't necessarily think you can. I think Chase Brown's a sensational talent. I think he deserves to be paid, honestly, at that position for Cincinnati. But are you in a position this year in the draft where you're allocating a day 3 pick, whether it be the 6th and the 7th round or even potentially before that, for a wide receiver in this draft? Are you trying to find that Yoshi replacement? Is Yoshi in this team's plans long term? Right? Are you in a spot where Yoshi goes out there this year, he's your wide receiver 3, maybe you give him a little competition in camp, he has a good year, and now you're looking at it like, are we going to pay another receiver? Right? That to me doesn't make much sense. And again, I've been a Yoshi guy. When Yoshi's out there with 9, looks good. When he's out there with a guy that ain't number 9, it doesn't look good. And obviously, he had the drop issues at the beginning of this past year for Cincinnati. But I think adding to that wide receiver room is something that is not a demanding need, right? But it's also something that you need to take a look at, right? And I don't think you're doing it with any of these free agents walking around, right? Very well seems like it is a draft pick if you were going to ultimately look at that position and look to upgrade at that position. And the coaching staff has talked about competition for Yoshi in the past. I don't think that would be necessarily a bad thing to have a little competition in that room and see if you can't do some things differently. But again, for a 6th-round pick, we're talking about Duke Tobin and all his struggles picking players for Cincinnati. That was a great pick, right? Yoshi out of Princeton, 6th round, track star, certainly growing up and throughout his collegiate career as well. He's really panned out into a really solid player, right? Second contract player, we'll see, but are you adding some additional depth there at the back end of your wide receiver depth chart? Running back, right? Chase Brown. Feel really good when he's out there. You need depth at that position. I think Samaje Perine was kind of the stars of the season last year as far as just being a great acquisition for Cincinnati, right? Obviously, he was brought in, had the stint here in Cincinnati earlier in his career. Don't go to the Super Bowl for Samaje Perine. Bounces around a little bit, Kansas City, Denver, ultimately lands back here. I think a lot of people were like, all right, is this a Von Bell situation, right, where he comes back and it's like, oh, this guy can't play, right? In his role, there wasn't really much of a role in Kansas City or Denver, and the Bengals asked him to do a lot, certainly more than I expected. I thought he did a tremendous job, so having him back as a protector, the value he brings to special teams, and as a leader, as a veteran presence in that locker room, I think speaks volumes. But behind him, what do you got? You got Taj Brooks, right, who I was excited when the Bengals took him day 3 last year, but what's his growth and development going to look like? Because he really didn't get the ball, didn't really have an opportunity to get on the field, and when he did, he didn't really do much with it. So how did the Bengals feel about Taj Brooks? Could he be a guy that is I don't want to say they're bell cow of the future, but a guy that can be a contributing part to what they do offensively in the future? Very well could be something worth discussing. Brightwell and Milton are also still on the roster. Fine depth pieces, but do you look to maybe upgrade at one of those spots? Certainly potential for that as well. And, you also need depth along the offense line. It's football, right? I can go through every position, other than punter and kicker. And even at those spots, you could probably use, a guy on your practice squad, or a guy at least that you have on the back of your mind that you could potentially add to your team in an emergency type of situation. But it's football. You need depth everywhere, and it's very, very difficult, especially when you're paying guys at the top of the market to have that kind of depth all over your roster. But I think we're excited that Reisner's back, and they look at it, the offensive line, and say, well, we got our starters in place, but what's the depth look like beyond that, right? You got Jalen Rivers, who was thrown into some playing time. I think that's going to really go a long way for him and his career and his development and his ascension as potentially a starter for the Cincinnati Bengals in the future. Cody Ford feels like a foregone conclusion that he's going to be cut. My gut says he's going to be cut. I know the team likes him. I know the organization likes him. But I think it'd make a lot of sense to move off him and try to upgrade at that position, right? Lucas Patrick, is he going to be a guy that comes back to this football team or not? What does that depth look like along the interior of your offensive line? So that's certainly another position there offensively. And also at quarterback. And this is something that we've discussed at length here. But how long is Joe Flacco going to wait on this thing? Right, because the starting spots, I think it's safe to say, have kind of dried up across the league. Somebody's going to get hurt in the offseason, whether it be training camp, before that, preseason, leading up to the season, or maybe even the first couple of weeks of the season. Is this a situation where Joe Flacco says, I'm not going to sign before week 1. I'm going to, sit this thing out for a few weeks into the regular season and see if ultimately somebody gets hurt and sign with that particular team. So I think he knows that if he signs back with Cincinnati, they're not going to trade him if somebody else goes down, right? If somebody across the league went down and all of a sudden they're calling Cincinnati for Joe Flacco in a situation where Cincinnati would have signed Joe Flacco, Duke Tobin, he might not even pick up the phone, right? If that's the case. He's got no interest in dealing a player like that on his team, right, in the middle of the season, right? I mean, that was pretty unprecedented. He's done it a couple times over the past few years. They added that running back, Herbert, couple of years ago, adding Flacco, but that was a necessity, right? There was no other option they had to add a quarterback, and they were lucky that Cleveland was foolish enough to deal them Joe Flacco, obviously, last year towards the middle of the year. But how long is he going to wait? Because something we've talked about a lot, this Josh Johnson signing is a placeholder, right? They don't want him going into week 1 as Joe Burrow's backup. Now, they made the decision that ultimately, if it came to that, they would be able to live with that, right? But that is far from, a perfect situation for Cincinnati. So I think this Joe Flacco thing, it's very much wait and see right now. But, obviously, he's a backup quarterback, and anytime you get to the backup quarterback, your season's probably cooked anyway. But when you have the history that Joe Burrow has had, right, and if you can find yourself in a situation where he gets hurt, but it's not going to be, out for the year, kind of like what happened last year, having a guy like Joe Flacco that can come in, know the offense, has rapport now with Jamar T and Zach, I mean, that would go a very long way, right? Very, very long way. And nothing's going to, erase the fact that Cincinnati didn't add that linebacker early on in free agency. But I think people really are not understanding the value that Joe Flacco brings to this team. If they are able to sign Joe Flacco and get him back for this year, that is a signing worth celebrating. And obviously you hope he never plays a single snap for the Cincinnati Bengals. But just having that plan in place, knowing that if something were to happen at 9, this thing can stay afloat with Flacco. Can this thing stay afloat with Josh Johnson? And that's no disrespect towards Josh Johnson. He's played for half the teams in the National Football League, right? Is the reason why he's had such a long career. Clearly, he brings a lot from a football IQ perspective, from a leadership perspective, and he's a good guy, too. If you play this long in the NFL and play on all these teams, and all these teams give you a chance, and a lot of them give you multiple chances, you can't be a bad guy, right? Clearly, he is a good guy, and he checks off a lot of boxes there. So, the Bengals are in a situation where they'll ride with him as the backup if they have to, but that's by no means their goal here. That was not the goal when they brought back Josh Johnson. Very much a situation where it was a placeholder. So, we can be excited about some of the guys that they brought in, but at the same time, there are a lot of spots that need a lot of depth, right? Even at safety, right? You bring in Brian Cook, it's like, all right, you got him in battle, but what do you got behind that? Especially now you lost Tyson Anderson. Could have brought him back. We'll talk about this more in a second. Could have brought him back for less than $2 million. You opted not to. But Brian Cook, Jordan Battle, by the way, potential extension offseason for Jordan Battle. The only reason I'm saying that is because they extended OBJ, and I didn't see that coming, so maybe they could extend Jordan Battle, but it feels like he's going into the final year of his contract, and they're trying to figure out whether or not he could be a piece long-term or not, and they're in a situation now where they want to wrap their arms around him and be like, yeah, he's our guy, we love him, he's really good, but is that going to work out this year? Ultimately, we'll see. But, I mean, they got to draft somebody at safety. They got to add somebody in safety. At safety, another safety. Are you going to sign another free agent? Probably not. But if you go in with your depth pieces as, Dejon Anthony and P.J. Jules, that's a problem, right, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. So backup safety is very, very important. Adding to the linebacker room. I mean, you look at that linebacker depth chart and you just go, how in the world are we in this spot if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? With Barrett Carter, right, Demetrius Knight Jr., and Oren Burks, who's still on the team. Right, I think we were just like, Reed and I were kind of laughing a few weeks ago, like, oh, yeah, Oren Burks, he's not going to be back. Like, they'll cut somebody, keep their rookies, add that linebacker room. Now it's like, are you keeping Oren Burks, right? Joe Giles Harris, is he sticking around? Shaka Hayward, I love him as a practice squad guy. I love him as an emergency guy. But is he going to have some type of role with this team as far as playing meaningful snaps? I don't know. But you look at that linebacker depth chart now and you go, how in the world did we get here? How in the world did we let ourselves get here? And if there's one thing that derailed Cincinnati last year, obviously Joe Burrow got hurt. We know this. We understand that. But if you remove that from the equation, it's the linebacker play derailed this team, right? And you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you make the same mistake multiple years over and it costs you. The Bengals have already done this at safety, right? They did it for 2 years. We knew going into last year that it wasn't good enough at safety, that the Geno Stone thing wasn't working out, and that they needed to pivot. They remained stubborn, and they said, you know what, we signed him to a 2-year deal, do a little restructure, make him a little bit cheaper, have him go out there and perform for us again. What happened? It was just as bad. In fact, it was worse, right? And that derailed him. Linebacker, last year, huge thing that derailed the Cincinnati Bengals. Are they going to really be in a spot where they say, you know what, let's try it again, right, this second year, and then we'll pivot off it after that if we have to? Eerily similar to what transpired at safety over the course of the past few years. You don't want that happening at linebacker. You don't want the same issue that cost you the previous year to also cost you the following year, which sets you off course. Completely sets you off course. And that's one thing if it sets you off course while you're in a rebuilding mode, right, or you had a quarterback on a rookie deal and you're trying to figure it out. It's not where Cincinnati is. It's not where Cincinnati is. They cannot afford to make a mistake that penalizes them over multiple years. It's the NFL. New information, new opinions. You have to be in a situation where you are comfortable pivoting, right? If it ain't working, pivot. Do not stay stubborn to some of the things that you did in the past and hope that that will provide and yield different results, right? Are you going to get some growth and development? Yeah, you got it from Myles Murphy. Hopefully you get it from some other guys on rookie deals on this team. But to sit there and 100% rely on it and not have a backup plan in place is just, that's bad business. It's bad business. And unfortunately, that's kind of the situation Cincinnati finds themselves in right now. Lastly, Tyson Anderson. For the life of me, I don't understand this. Right? Darren Simmons spoke, I can't remember if it was at the Combine or just earlier in the offseason, basically loving up on Tyson Anderson. And it kind of felt like a pitch to Duke Tobin and company of, hey, you know what, let's bring this guy back. And I would be one thing if he's signing a multi-year deal and some team wants to take a flyer on him being a starting safety and also being that ace on special teams for him. In that case, I would have said, see ya, right? Take care. Appreciate you. Love you, but take care, right? That's not the situation that transpired. Gets less than $2 million. 1 year with Denver, I think it's like 1.2. Don't quote me on that. Somewhere in there, I think it's less than 1.5. Maybe it's somewhere in there. Less than $2 million for an NFL player. And he goes to Denver, right? And Denver's not a rival to Cincinnati, but they're a team that plays in the same conference that has aspirations of winning a Super Bowl that was on the doorsteps of competing for a Super Bowl last year. And what did they do? I mean, Sean Payton made so many adjustments. He fired multiple guys. They're bringing guys in. They're trading for Jalen Waddle, actively trying to get better. And they recognize that Tyson Anderson, the Bengals haven't gotten him back. What in the world are they doing? Let's go get him. We don't have to pay him at a price where he's going to come in and be the safety over Talanoa Hufanga, right? Or one of those guys on the back end for Denver. That wasn't the thought process. Their thought process is he was the lead on special teams in Cincinnati. Let's have him do the same thing here in Denver. And he's going to make plays for them if he can stay healthy. And I don't get that at all. I don't get it at all, because there are some teams in the National Football League that devalue special teams a little bit, and it cost them. Rams. If they had that cleaned up a little bit better, probably hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. Niners. Cost them, right? You don't want to be in that situation if you're Cincinnati. You have to be buttoned up with that unit. And you got McPherson, who had a great year, and then it ended awkwardly, but got confidence in him. Rico's got a massive leg. He's going to get the coffin corner stuff down a little bit, stop kicking it in the end zone. But you feel good about him as a punter, I would say, or the organization at least does. Maybe you don't as a fan, but I think the Bengals do. But you got to have guys that can make plays. You got to have guys that can run down there and make tackles. You got to have a leader on that unit. That was Tyson Anderson, and it was a very affordable price. So I don't know what the plan is, if they feel like they got someone that could fill that gunner role or not. But I'm looking at this going, he signed a one-year deal, less than $2 million a year, and you're letting him go to a team that you're directly competing with when it comes to winning a Super Bowl. I get it's not the Ravens or the Steelers, but it's basically that next level, right? When you look at some of these other teams, top teams in the AFC, that is the Denver Broncos, and you let him go there, which I don't get it. I don't get it at all. You could have tagged him, by the way, but you could have just paid him 1.5. Right, you could have just paid him $2 million. And, he didn't go to college out there in Denver. Maybe he's got some connection out there that I'm unaware of. But, you should have been able to keep him unless he just absolutely wanted out, or if he thought he was going to be in a spot where he could compete as a safety. He's not starting at Denver, for Denver at safety under that contract. It just isn't happening. But that was one of the more head-scratching things that I've seen ultimately. You let him go at that price. I got no clue what's going on there. No clue at all. Little college basketball here on today's show. The tournament obviously well underway. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of today's show. But Utah State was a team that a lot of people had a close eye on in this tournament, certainly in this area, because of Jared Calhoun and ultimately his connection to the University of Cincinnati, and obviously that program having an opening at head coach. And we'll check this real quickly live here. It does not appear as though he has been hired officially yet. There's people out there saying it could be official as early as today. Jeff Goodman pointed that out, college basketball analyst. I'm not ready to say it's a for sure thing, right? I think there's a world where it could be somebody else, but it seems like he is clearly the front runner, and it seems like they are closing in on it being official. And obviously it hasn't gotten over the finish line yet, but, it certainly feels like he is the front runner here at this point for the job. And they played Villanova. They got a win, which, by the way, Willard for Villanova is just making a fool out of himself. Had the conversation with the sideline reporter. They were getting their tails kicked in, and they were asking what he was going to do. And he goes, I'm going to fire my whole staff. And and the lady's like, well, you can't do that now. He's like, no, I'm going to go fire my whole staff and then try to find a new staff, right? And then he came out after and said it was a joke. Are you an idiot? I guess maybe Willard is an idiot, but I didn't get what was happening there at all. But anyway, Calhoun gets a win in round one. They play Arizona. Thought it was a valiant effort, but outmatched. Arizona, I think a lot of people would say, is the best team in the country, and a lot of people have them winning their respective brackets. So, I think people have used that program as kind of a stepping stone for a while, which is ironic because Cincinnati has been used as a stepping stone, particularly at the football level, and obviously Mick Cronin was here before taking the UCLA job. But there have been some people that have come and gone from Utah State, and Calhoun has pointed that out, and he had talked about, the focus of his team and taking it one game at a time and, limiting the distractions and kind of saying, well, when you have success, people, other coaches are calling trying to get your players and pay them in the NIL and the portal, and other athletic directors are calling trying to get you to be their next head coach at a university. So it speaks to the success that he has had at Utah State. And, he's got the connection. Obviously, the program graduated in 2004, has built a resume for himself, has been at Utah State recently, has the connection to Huggins, which we talked about this on the show last week. I think that really goes a long way for the alumni base and, the the donors as far as the NIL goes, because I think there's something to be said about wanting to get back to kind of the Cronin level of just going to the tournaments, as Mick Cronin, again, at UCLA goes to the tournament, but gets kind of waxed by UConn. I think people were growing frustrated with Cronin at the end of that run, where it's like, you're getting to the tournament every year, but you're not getting to the second weekend, right? But I think after the disaster of the Brennan years, and then even these past 5 with West, it's like, all right, let's get back in the tournament. But there's so many people in the alumni base and the booster group that love Bob Huggins, and they have this connection and infatuation with Bob Huggins, which I totally get, right? I mean, when he was the man at UC, they were going crazy, right, with all those wins, and the program was a hot commodity, and it didn't get more big time than Cincinnati Bearcats basketball program when Bob Huggins was kind of running the show. So Calhoun was on his staff, right, and also was on his staff for a little bit at West Virginia as well. So the writing's on the wall. It feels like a safe hire, too, for Cunningham, and that's what he needs, right, because these hires have kind of blown up in his face. Obviously, Satterfield is still employed, but that you got your questions all over the place there. Wes didn't go well. If you're Cunningham, it's like, let's not take a flyer on somebody here. Let's go safe, right, and see ultimately if that can equate to some wins for us and get people off his back, right, which I'm sure is what Cunningham is trying to do. It's like he's getting a lot of crap, right? You talk about it with Duke Tobin and the Bengals all the time, where it was kind of the first time you really saw him in the crosshairs. You don't really see an AD in the crosshairs a ton unless the basketball program and the football program are both stinking, right? And when you're in a premier conference now like the Big 12, and the expectations are high, and you got a lot of money going in, right? A lot of people donating to NIL and paying these student athletes. And when you can't get to the postseason, you can't get into the NCAA tournament from a basketball perspective, all right, you can't put yourself in the conversation for the 12-team playoff from a football perspective, certainly not after losing Luke Fickell several years ago, it becomes difficult for you. And I think the Cincinnati alumni base, and if you're a Cincinnati fan, would be like, let's kind of go safe here. Calhoun feels like he's safe, right? He's built up a resume, has had success. This feels like the next step for him, right? Has some more experience than when they hired Wes, coming from Greensboro, who was super young. He was there for 10 years, but was super young. You got more experience here with Calhoun. You got the connection with the fan base. You got the connection with Huggins. So we'll see ultimately if it becomes official, but feels like a safe hire. And I think if you're a UC fan, are you popping champagne, right? Did you just land Rick Pitino or some star head coach? No. But, you checked off the box, you improved at that area, and you put yourself in a position to have success in 27 and beyond. That's all you can ask for Cincinnati. Real quickly on Wes, he got the job at Charlotte. I'm happy for Wes Miller. I really am. We talked about this when we first came on here to the show today, whereas, college basketball level and even college football level too, but specifically with college basketball, there's only so many of these jobs, and it's not like, you can just get fired and go be an offensive coordinator. Right? Obviously, you can be on somebody's staff, but that's, to me, football head coach to offensive coordinator going back in the opposite direction. Yeah, it's a significant, loss of income, certainly, but just kind of a downgrade, right? You're getting demoted, right? Not promoted. But in basketball, like if you just or a head coach and then you're on the staff, it doesn't feel like that. Feels like more of a significant demotion, if we're being honest with you. So there's only so many of these jobs that come open, and obviously none of the top jobs would be trying to get Wes, right? Arizona State's not trying to get Wes, but to have the connection with Charlotte, have the connection obviously with that area, played for Roy Williams at North Carolina, was well documented. I did think I saw some stuff about him having gambling odds to be the next head coach at North Carolina, which, again, no disrespect to Wes, but I think you got to have a little bit more success at Cincinnati before getting a job like the Carolina job, as they ultimately decided to part ways with Hubert Davis. But, Charlotte, is it a huge job? No, but it kind of feels like where Wes should be, right? And if you have success with Charlotte, you get him into the tournaments, another big school will come calling, right? It's not like he's 70 years old and this is going to be his last stop, so he gets to land on his feet. He gets to go to Charlotte, and, if he has success there over the course, I think it's a 5-year deal. If he has success over that course of that contract, he'll have one more crack at getting a big-time job. And maybe he'll be more prepared for it. Maybe the ball will bounce his way a few more times than what it did at Clifton. But I was happy to see this news this morning. It was time for the Bearcats to move on. It was time for them to go in a different direction. It was time for him no longer to be the head coach at the University of Cincinnati. But at the same time, it's not like he had to ban this guy from the sport or be in a situation where you're rooting that he doesn't have a job and that he's, just on some staff somewhere. No, he gets another crack at this thing. Less eyeballs, less attention. Gets to go back to, his roots, obviously, in that area of the country in North Carolina, and has another opportunity. And if he can't win here, then you're like, well, you know what? It might be the end of the road. But then again, the expectation level at Charlotte is not different, or is completely different than the expectation level at Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati, I mean, people out there laugh when I say this, but like Cincinnati as a basketball program, the expectation is to make deep runs in the NCAA tournaments. And obviously that has not happened in forever. But that's what, former players, right? Terry Nelson has come on. Like, that is what the expectation is at this university and with this basketball program, and they have just fallen so short of that. Whereas Charlotte, right, are they expecting him to win the national title or compete for a national title? No, they're not, right? They're looking to win their conference, win games, maybe pop into the NCAA tournament a couple of times over the course of his contract, but the expectation level is significantly different for Wes Miller. But he lands on his feet and ultimately is going to get the Charlotte job in North Carolina, so good for Wes Miller. All right, so a little bit here on the Cincinnati Reds. I was at spring training a couple of nights ago. Where are we at now? Monday. I was there on Saturday night. Is that right? Saturday night? Yeah, Saturday night. There at spring training. First time out in Goodyear. Unbelievable. First time out in Arizona. The heat's no joke, but it is dry. That's kind of the joke. Well, it's dry heat. It's not humid. It is true, by the way. It doesn't mean it's not hot, but it is a little bit more bearable than some of the stuff we get here in Cincinnati when it's, 95 plus degrees, or certainly down in Florida when it's that level of temperature there as well. But great experience at Goodyear. Would encourage anybody that is a Reds fan to do it at some point. I didn't really know. Obviously, I've seen pictures of what the complex looks like, but I didn't really know, kind of the vibe, I guess, going in. But it was very laid back, almost like you're kind of just going to a high school baseball game with obviously more people in the stands and more going on, but very laid back, tent set up where you could get some T-shirts or different food, right? And, you kind of just went through a line and you would pick up like a hot dog or whatever, and then ultimately you would go pay for it, right? You didn't have somebody handing it to you. So it's just a different experience than a typical, Major League ball game, in the regular season. But it was awesome. And just kind of seeing the players shift, right? I mean, it was basically the opening day lineup the night I was there, with the exception of Spencer Steer. He was not in the lineup, but Gino was in there. Ellie was in there. Manny McClain was in there. Stevenson also was not, obviously, but Trevino was the catcher. Saw him go yard. That was pretty cool. Ke'Bryan was playing. Friedel was out there for the beginning. Benson was out there. Saw him at a long ball, so that was pretty cool certainly there as well. But then they play like 4 or 5 innings, and then they all kind of leave, right? And it's an inning switch or whatever, and all those guys are walking from the dugout out to the outfield and leaving the complex, and then you got all the backups in. And the Reds won a walk-off grand slam the night I was there. Pretty crazy. And we actually were sitting with all White Sox fans and, getting pretty rowdy there a little bit, as far as as rowdy as you can get for a spring training game, I guess. But Reds had bases loaded, 3-2 count, 2 outs. And P.J. Higgins played long ball to win the game, which was absolutely electric. And he was battling away, fouling pitches off. And if he would just got on base, bases were loaded, 2 outs, Reds were down. Or it was tied, right, in the spring training game. So, they would have just called it a tie. But Reds would have won if he would have walked, gotten hit by a pitch, whatever. And he says, no, I'm going to leave the ball yard and hit a grand slam. So, pretty cool. But, again, really encourage everybody to get out there to Goodyear if you haven't done so already. Really just, again, first time in Arizona, Queen Creek, Scottsdale, Goodyear, explored those towns. Pretty cool stuff for the weekend. But we're back here and we're ready to go, obviously, for this week. But a couple of Reds notes. Lodolo is kind of the talk, obviously, of the town right now, as he had yet another blister injury. I am not a doctor. I don't know what to do, but it seems like something that's going to happen forever with him. I would say it's obviously frustrating for him, but, if you're a fan, you're like, all this technology that we have, all this AI stuff, you can't put something on his finger to prevent him from getting blisters, and I guess not. From golfing, I get a ton of blisters. or if you're lifting weights or something like that. So I'm someone that is very susceptible to blisters as well. And I don't know if it's just his arm action when he's letting go of the baseball. Obviously, he's got a lot of movement on his pitches, and the seam is just gnawing away at that index finger. I really don't know. But, I think it's just something that you're going to have to deal with Nick Lodolo, and seemingly every year there's going to be a stint where the blister thing becomes too much of an issue. It gets big, it gets popped, and you miss a couple of starts. We'll see. Tito, all he did was come out and say that, he got it popped. Obviously, after he left the game, they were draining it in the training room, and it's kind of a wait-and-see thing. And obviously, he's got a history of having this issue. And now all of a sudden, you're looking at this rotation, and you're going, well, it was going to be the six-man rotation, or condensed rotation, six-man for a couple of weeks, whatever you want to call it, right? Not technically a six-man rotation, but 6 starters made the team. But Green's out with the spurs in the elbow, right? And Singer also the other day had a blister. So, or either of those blisters are going to cause these guys to start on the IL. I don't know. It's going to cause them to miss a start. I don't know. Is it something that's going to be a reoccurring issue for this team going forward? I don't know. And ultimately, that scares you a little bit if you're the Cincinnati Reds. So, Williamson, right, he's going to have an opportunity. Obviously, the youngsters, Chase Burns, Brett Latter, going to have an opportunity. And Andrew Abbott's got to, he's got to lock in here. And I watched him. He actually through the game that I was at in Goodyear, and again, a little bit shaky. I think certainly better than some of his previous outings, but a lot of pressure on him. Obviously, he's getting the ball on opening day, but if you're going to be without Lodolo or Singer, one of those guys, you're without Hunter Green, you can't have Andrew Abbott go out there and throw 4 innings and give up 6 runs. Right, that he's got to be a heck of a lot better than that, and there's a lot of pressure on him. I got full belief that he's going to be able to rise to the occasion and ultimately deliver. But for the Cincinnati Reds, with some of these injuries and the way that he pitched during the spring, he being Andrew Abbott, fair to be concerned right now. So very much wait and see. And obviously our crew here at Chatterbox will have you covered. Ultimately, if Nick Lodolo, if we get any news on the Nick Lodolo front, follow on socials, all that good stuff there certainly as well. Roster's finalized here for the Reds. It was interesting to know what they would, or to ponder what exactly they were going to do at that last corner outfield spot. Look, I like Will Benson a lot, right? I really like Will Benson a lot, and it kind of felt like last year at times he got shafted, or he's hitting the baseball well, not getting in the lineup. There's rumors about a relationship with him and Tito, what that looks like. He makes the roster, rightfully so. Deserves it. Hit some home runs. Hit a home run that I saw the other night in Goodyear. So he makes it. I was always more of a Blade guy just because it was kind of mixing it up a little bit. You kind of knew what you had in Will Benson, and I thought maybe there's a bigger, higher ceiling you could tap into with Blade, who, by the way, had an awesome spring as well. But he had an option, right? So he's going to start in AAA, and I think that was kind of the takeaway from Tito on several of these guys, including Reese Hines as well, where it's like, the spot you're competing for is a bench spot. And, you can have a Nathaniel Lowe who's 30 years of age at that spot. That makes more sense. But if you're a younger player, we still don't know if that's where you're at in the big leagues. You could be a starter in the big leagues. And I think there's people that think that way of Reese Hines. I think there's people that think that way of J.J. Bleday within this Reds organization. So I think it makes sense. That was kind of Tito's response to it, is we want you to play every day, right? You're young. We believe in you. Heck of a spring training, great job. Nothing you did in spring is the reason why you didn't make the team, right? We're just in a spot right now where we want you to go to Louisville and, play for those guys and play every day and go from there. And, I think from a AAA perspective, the Reds got some serious depth there as well. I mean, think about some of the guys that are down there competing, right? And Edwin Arroyo, a guy that's certainly going to be a factor in on that team certainly as well. And a guy in Christian Encarnacion Strand, who we haven't talked about at all the past few years because he hasn't done anything. But think about the dialogue around him, 3-ish years ago. There was excitement there. So, if somebody were to get hurt, you don't want CES on your opening day roster, but if multiple guys are getting hurt, what's hitting the fan, and you're like, my goodness, bringing him up, there's certainly worse situations to be in if you're the Cincinnati Reds. So there's depth there. Reese Hines is going to be there. J.J. Bleday is going to be there. Blake Dunn's going to be there. Dane Myers made the roster. Acquired him from Miami. I think we're all excited to see what he can do. Certainly patrolling the outfield when he's out there, and potentially at the plate as well. Brings a speed element certainly, to the 26-man roster for the Cincinnati Reds, which I think is exciting. And I think it's something that you need to have. And you talk about, all these stereotypes that small market teams need to have. You got to do the platoon thing, right? Where it's like, well, you pay two guys, or you're paying multiple guys to do multiple different jobs, right? And you're not just putting one guy out there against all pitching. You try to make it lefty, you try to make it righty, right? Obviously you got to pitch well. You got to have good speed too, and having a faster team this year, which the Reds do, I think is pretty exciting, and we'll see ultimately if that equates to more stolen bases or whatever the case may be. But having a fast lineup out there, one, it's fun to watch as a fan, but also I think it really puts you in an advantageous spot if you're the Cincinnati Reds as well. So Hines is a guy that he's been up before, right? He went on that tear, was that a couple years ago, where he was hitting home runs left and right. Not quite an Aristides Aquino type tear, but a tear nonetheless. And I do think there's people that have belief that he can be a factor on this team at the big league level going forward. And he clearly proved that in spring. And, that's just kind of how it is when you're putting together a roster. You might have a great spring training, but you didn't make the team that you were hoping to make. But doesn't mean your career's over. Doesn't mean they're not going to need you at some point throughout the year. Nathaniel Lowe, again, that makes more sense for a bench guy. It's like, well, he's 30 years of age, right? He's bounced around the league a little bit. He's been there. He's done that. Silver Slugger, right? Obviously, World Championship with the Rangers a couple of years ago. So different type of player, and he didn't have options, right? It'd be one thing if Nathaniel Lowe had options, right? Then it's like, well, maybe option him. Well, if you get rid of Nathaniel Lowe, guess what? He's not playing for the Cincinnati Reds because somebody else would pick him up. It was kind of a, I don't say miracle, but it was kind of crazy, in my opinion, that they were able to land him, non-roster invitee to spring training and ultimately put him in a position where he's making the team, and he's on the 26-man roster. So the Chatterbox Reds crew did a podcast kind of breaking down the whole roster, but check that out ultimately if you have not done so already. Flag football, a couple of quick thoughts. You got owners' meetings coming up here in the National Football League, and, I didn't watch the flag football stuff. I saw clips, and it's like, it's kind of cool, right? You got some, high-level guys out there throwing it around, running around a little bit. I was not surprised at all by the outcome. They're not playing tackle football. Like, it's totally different. These guys, these Team USA guys, like, that is what they do, right? It's not, just some random guys across the country that are assembled. That is Team USA, right? Team USA flag football. That means they're the best flag football players in the country, right? So people that are like, the NFL guys are going to embarrass these Team USA flag football guys. They're not playing tackle football. They're playing flag football. And these NFL guys haven't played flag football. So I thought it went kind of how I expected there a little bit. Tom Brady, clearly the guy loves football. And clearly, he was laser focused and he was fired up about it. He was locked in and he could still sling it. And if he could still move around, he would still be playing at the NFL level. And shoot, he may have kept it going another year if he didn't have the divorce thing going on with Giselle, to be completely honest with you. But I'm not a Brady guy. I respect, obviously, his career and what he's done. But seeing him out there, some of the throws that he made at that age, and even the ability to move within the pocket, the one clip of him shedding the tackle, then hitting digs in the back of the end zone. And even just some of the clips at practice where you watch it from the camera angles from a quarterback's perspective and just – how the guys are coming open and the ball's coming out and it's right on the money. So seeing Tom Brady back out there certainly was pretty cool. But from a Bengals perspective and a Joe Burrow perspective, seeing him run around like that and all those jukes, I think it's one thing in basketball. Like, remember when the All-Star game was kind of must-see TV, right? And there were points where, Kobe and LeBron would, like, ISO one-on-one and go at it, and it was cool. You can get hurt, obviously, in any sports, but I think football, even flag football, is obviously the highest, likely situation as you're making sharp cuts, getting in and out of breaks, and you see it all the time with guys, serious injuries, ACL, Achilles, in non-contact stuff, in camp. So, they escaped unscathed as far as a serious injury goes, but in these owners meetings coming up, like, they got to be like, you know what, it was cool to have this happen and you should still have this event, but as far as our star players taking part in this, right? I mean, if you're the Blackburns and you're the Browns and you're Zach Taylor, you're Duke Tobin, and you're watching Joe Burrow do that and you're seeing these clips, right? You probably weren't watching the game, but somebody's showing you these clips on your phone. You're going, what in the world is going on? right? Especially with the history that he has. Same thing if you're the Commanders watching Jaden Daniels. You're like, what in the world? Guy missed most of the year last year because he was hurt. He's out here going crazy in a flag football game. So I think the owners will speak up about this. Wouldn't surprise me at all if we don't see these guys playing again in this type of situation. But, credit to Michael Rubin, Fanatics, for putting it on. It was, again, I didn't watch it, but some of the clips look pretty cool. But Joe Burrow escapes unscathed, but I don't know if he's going to be doing much more of that in the future, to be completely honest with you. Some closing thoughts on March Madness. Mentioned this at the top of the show. There's people out there that are like, oh, NIL has ruined the tournament, yada, yada, yada. No, it hasn't, right? I think we want the best possible matchups for Sweet 16 and beyond, which is what we're getting, right? And we still saw plenty of compelling games, right? Were there some blowouts? Yes, but there were some compelling games. And let's not act like there were zero upsets. Obviously, there weren't many, but there was a couple of upsets throughout the duration of the opening weekend. As we just kind of take a look at this. High Point beat Wisconsin. People talking about Wisconsin potentially beating Arkansas, potentially beating Arizona after that, right? Well, no, they lost to High Point. That's a 12-5 victory for them. VCU beat North Carolina. North Carolina fires their head coach. North Carolina is one of the most premier jobs in all of college basketball. Now that job's open. Upset in that one. Popular one nonetheless. A lot of people picking VCU in that game, but an upset nonetheless. How about Texas? They're going on a bit of a run here in March, right? Kind of putting themselves in a position where they get hot in Dayton. Next thing you know, here comes a couple of more wins. Here comes Sean Miller. He's had success in the round of 32. They're going to have an opportunity against this Purdue team going forward. There's an upset there. I get it's Texas and it's not, Murray State, but, that's kind of, you can't call Texas a Cinderella, but an 11 seed getting to the Sweet 16 and they were playing in Dayton. Pretty cool story. St. Louis took Georgia out to the woodshed, which, by the way, the SEC, my goodness, they are hurting in this tournament. Santa Clara, Kentucky was an incredible game. If you're a Santa Clara bettor like myself, it was not. They hit what you thought was the game winner, and then Ortega Owe comes down the courts and banks it in, sent it into OT. They rode that momentum throughout that overtime session. They won. I think some people thought they were going to be able to carry that momentum into their game yesterday. Ultimately, that did not end up transpiring. And you look at that comparison. We put out a graphic on socials. Calipari and Mark Pope, UK looks pretty silly right now, don't they? I've always been a huge Calipari guy. I thought it was ridiculous that they moved off him. And, clearly he's doing great things at Arkansas. A couple of others here. Let's see. There was one other one that I did want to bring up on the show. Oh, yeah, again, Missouri. They got whooped. I don't remember exactly what the line was on that, but they were the 10 seed there. So you thought maybe they had some life. I can't remember if they were favored or not, so technically not an upset. But Miami took Mizzou out to the woodshed there in that game. And, A&M was able to pick up a win. And how about Nebraska as they beat Vanderbilt? I think, again, they were favored in that game, but a pretty impressive performance there from them. And then Iowa knocking out Florida is obviously the biggest one of the tournament to this point, as a lot of people, myself included, had Florida cutting down the nets again for a second consecutive year. I think certainly happy they're not, as Todd Golden is kind of making himself a not very likable guy, I think, is probably the best way I can put that. But Florida is out. We're going to get a new champion this year, and I'm particularly excited for Duke St. John's. Duke a little bit short-handed at this point. Gangba did come back for their game against TCU. Limited role. What's his availability going to look like? Can you get Caleb Foster in the game against the Johnnies or not? But that game, St. John's and Kansas, was incredible. One of the best games, maybe the game of the tournament to this point. St. John's felt like they were in command for much of it, and then Kansas comes roaring back. Peterson's in and out of the game. Does the guy like playing basketball or not? Showed up at the end of the game, made some plays, so credit to him for that. Game winner for the Johnnies at the buzzer as Patino, man. That guy's unbelievable. And he's just chugging along in his 70s, doing a great job, and he gets to play Duke in the Sweet 16. Get your popcorn out for that one. Should be pretty awesome. But tournament, people complain about, the NIL is ruining it. NIL has got to get regulated more. Is there stuff the NCAA has to clean up? 100%. The tournament's in a good spot. We've seen a couple of upsets, not as much as maybe some people would like, but we're going to get some banger matchups in the Sweet 16 and ultimately beyond. Certainly there as well. Before we get out of here, I do want to give a shout-out to our friends over at Sharefax Credit Union. The Stone Shield Show is brought to you by Sharefax Credit Union. Sharefax is rooted in Cincinnati with 9 branches across the city. Sharefax is a not-for-profit financial institution owned by its members that returns earnings to them through lower fees and better rates in addition to traditional banking options. They have an auto promo going on right now, offering 1.5% off your qualified rates when you refinance your vehicle with them. Your first payment isn't due for 90 days. Loans subject to membership and credit approval. Restrictions apply. Visit the website for terms and conditions. Go to sharefax.org or apply online or call 513-753-2440. Also, make sure you check out some gear over at Homage. Chatterbox Sports is proud to partner with Homage, and we've got a special deal for you. The first 100 listeners get 20% off site-wide. That includes all the great T-shirts, sweatshirts, and everyday gear you see. Just note there are a few exclusions that do apply, like some starter jackets and New Heights gear. I was wearing some Miami stuff last week from Homage. Picked up some Cincinnati Reds stuff that they shipped in. Really got a great collection. Cool stuff, also comfortable stuff. So stuff you can go out in, right? Go to a Reds game in, and also you're just chilling at the house on the couch. Very comfortable gear there for as well. Encourage you to go over to the website, check it out. To get your 20% off, use promo code CHATTER at checkout. Just go to homage.com/cbox. Use code CHATTER at homage.com/cbox. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Good to be back after a weekend in Arizona. We've got content for you all week long. Hopefully get some guests on the show as well to round out the week. But appreciate our sponsors. Appreciate QC Kinetix. Appreciate 78 Cigars. Appreciate Sharefax Credit Union being a part of what we do here at the show. Second week they are on board, so exciting stuff as it relates to that. But appreciate everyone as always. And until tomorrow, take care, everybody.